These are platforms where people buy and sell raw land. But the secret is in the pricing. So all I'm going to ask for is a $2,500 down payment, and then I'll make it a car payment. Let's say $299 a month and 9% interest for the next 84 months. So it's a one-time sale. I'm going to get my money out on the down payment. I could go 6 to 10 months out, and now I'm going to get $299 a month and 9% interest for the next 84 months. Alex, no renters, no rehabs, no renovations, no rodents.
Welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast, the show where we teach you how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want.
Doctor! 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 Doctor!
Now, here's your host, Dr. Alex Schloe.
How would you like to make 100% to 700% return of investment on your capital? How you can create passive income without having to deal with toilets, tenants, termites, and minimal taxes? This episode of the podcast, the Physicians and Properties Podcast, is for you. Today, we had Mark Podolsky on the podcast. He is the Land Geek, and he is teaching us how you can create passive income through land investing without the traditional headaches that you have with real estate investing. This episode was incredible. After having this podcast recorded, I will say this is the latest shiny object that I have, because land investing is an incredible opportunity. In this podcast, we talk about how you can set up your land investing business to be almost foolproof, lead you to financial freedom, and be approximately 90% passive. So if you're looking for a potential side gig to provide the financial freedom to give you that freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want to, this episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast is for you. If you don't mind, before we get started with the episode, do me a favor, leave a 5-star rating and review. And if you learned something from this episode, please share this episode with someone who can benefit from it. So without any further ado, let's get started with the Land Geek, Mark Podolsky. Mark Podolsky, welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast. I'm so excited to have you here on the podcast. Looking forward to learning more about land investing from the Land Geek himself. How are things going in Arizona?
Dr. Alex, thank you so much for having me. Arizona is amazing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Probably a little bit warmer there in Scottsdale than it is here, I would imagine, but all good.
Yeah, it's beautiful. This is the best time of year to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. We were out in Sedona, actually. We did a road trip from Colorado Springs out to Yosemite, and then we came down through Sedona and up New Mexico. And Arizona is just beautiful. I think the more time I spend in Arizona, I'm blown away by the diversity of the landscape. I think everybody thinks it's just going to be a desert. And up, in Sedona is beautiful, and Tucson and that whole area was just gorgeous. So anyways, it's a great place to be. Well, I'm excited to have you on the podcast today. We haven't talked a whole lot about land investing on the podcast, but it's definitely an asset class that I think folks will be interested in, and I know they'll be very interested in it after they hear your podcast. But before we get to that, do you mind telling folks a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So if we rewind the tape to 2000, I was a miserable, micromanaged 45-minute commute to work and back investment banker, specializing in mergers and acquisitions with private equity groups. Alex, it got so bad for me. I wouldn't get the Sunday blues, anticipating Monday coming around. I'd get the Friday blues, anticipating the weekend going by really fast and having me back at work on Monday. So my firm hires this guy, and he's telling me that as a side hustle, he's buying up raw land, pennies on the dollar at tax deed auctions. He's flipping them online, and he's making a 300% return on his money. And I'm looking at companies all day long. And a great company, has 15% EBITDA margins or free cash flow. Average company's 10%. I'm looking at companies all day long, less than 10%. So of course, I don't believe them. So I've got $3,000 saved up for car repairs. I go to New Mexico. I buy up 10 half-acre parcels, an average price of $300 each. I flip them online, and they all sell for an average price of $1,200 each. It worked. So I took all that money, and I went to an auction in Arizona, which is where I live. And it's 2000. There's no one in the room. I'm buying up lots and acreage for nothing. And I sell all that land, and I made over $90,000 cash. So I go to my wife, and she's pregnant. I said, honey, I'm going to quit my job and become a full-time land investor. And she said, absolutely not. So I said, okay. So it took 18 months for the land investing income to exceed the investment banking income. And then I quit. I've been doing it full-time ever since. I've done over 6,500 land deals and counting, and absolutely love it.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Well, I'm glad that your wife supported you ultimately and that those land deals led to freedom from investment banking. I think a lot of us physicians and medical professionals can certainly relate to the Sunday scaries or even the weekend scaries. And so definitely relatable there. And of course, investment banking, I would imagine, makes a decent income and medicine does as well. And so what kind of led you to decide, hey, I'm going all in on this. I'm willing to get rid of those golden handcuffs. Land flipping, land investing is for me.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it was just the combination of wanting total freedom and also at that time, this awareness that life is so fragile. It's September 11th in downtown Phoenix at my job. And I remember thinking life is really fragile and I'm making all this money land investing. And I was really at that point where it's like, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? I should go for it. And at that point, I was pretty close to replacing my income. And so I started making that plan. And I was just like, I'm going to go for it. And worst case scenario is I can just get another job if it doesn't work out. And that's really how I looked at it. And luckily, it did work out. But if it didn't work out, I think that for me, I'm pretty unemployable. I really like just working when I want, where I want, with whom I want, and having that freedom and sort of reverse engineering. Well, how do I get that?
That's awesome. Yeah, that freedom is what everyone's looking for. Financial freedom is one thing, but time freedom is really the big thing, and it can be tough. I tell folks all the time who are thinking about like, maybe I should cut back how much time I'm in the clinic, or maybe I should quit. And they're really worried. Like the biggest fear is like, oh, what am I going to do if this fails? It's really easy to get a job as a doctor. There's such a huge shortage. So worst comes to worst, your present day reality is your biggest fear. And so I think that that's something that can be hard to grasp sometimes. And I'm so glad to hear that worked out for you. What do you love about land investing?
Okay, so I'm going to walk you through the model step by step so that you can replicate it. And then you're going to understand why I love it so much. Okay, so Alex, you live in Colorado.
I do.
Okay, I'm going to assume that you own 5 acres of raw land in New Mexico and you owe $200 in back taxes. So you're advertising 2 important things to me. Number one, you have no emotional attachment to the raw land. You're in Colorado and you own land in New Mexico. And number 2, you're financially distressed in some weird way because we don't pay for our property taxes. We don't value it in the same way. As a result, the county treasurer keeps sending you notices saying, Alex, if you don't pay your property taxes, you're going to lose that property to a tax deed or a tax lien investor. So all I'm going to do is look at the comparable sales on your 5-acre parcel for the last 12 to 18 months. I'm going to take the lowest comparable sale and divide by 4. And that's going to get me what Warren Buffett would call a 300% margin of safety. And so I'm going to send you an offer. Let's say that the lowest comparable sale was $10,000. I'm going to send you an offer for $2,500. Now you accept it. Why? Because for you, $2,500 is better than nothing. In reality, 3 to 5% of people are going to accept my quote unquote top dollar offer. But now that you've accepted it, I have to go through due diligence or in-depth research. I have to confirm you still own the property. I have to confirm that back taxes are only $200. I have to make sure there's been no breaks in the chain of title, no liens or encumbrances. And I have this whole big property checklist. I outsource it to my team in Jamaica. They're connected to an American title company. It costs about $11. Now, if I was closing a bigger deal, let's say a $5,000 land deal or more, I'd close traditionally through a title company. I wouldn't take any title risk, but this is only $2,500. So everything checks out. I send you a check for $2,300. I send the treasurer a check for $200. I own it free and clear. Now I'm going to flip it and I'm going to make a cash flow at a rental home. So I'm going to sell it 30 days or less and I have a built-in best buyer. Do you know who it is?
I do not.
It's the neighbors. So I'm going to send out neighbor letters saying, here's your opportunity, protect your privacy, protect your views, know your neighbor. So oftentimes the neighbors will buy. Now, if the neighbors pass, I'll go to my buyers list. The buyers list passes, I'll go to a little website you may have heard of. It's called Meta or Facebook, buy-sell groups, and the marketplace. And then I'll go to the lands, landmodo.com, land.com, landandfarm.com, landsofamerica.com, landcentury.com, landflip.com, landhub.com. These are platforms where people buy and sell raw land. But the secret is in the pricing. So all I'm going to ask for is a $2,500 down payment, and then I'll make it a car payment. Let's say $299 a month at 9% interest for the next 84 months. So it's a one-time sale. I'm going to get my money out on the down payment. I could go 6 to 10 months out, and now I'm going to get $299 a month and 9% interest for the next 84 months Alex, no renters, no rehabs, no renovations, no rodents. And because I'm not dealing with a tenant, I'm exempt from Dodd-Frank, RESPA, and the SAFE Act, all this owner's real estate legislation. So then it's a simple game. Can I create enough land notes where my passive income exceeds my fixed expenses? And now I'm working or I'm practicing medicine because I want to, not because I have to.
Oh, Mark, I told you before this that I have shiny object syndrome, and land has been that shiny object syndrome lately. And you're making it sound really good, I must say. That is awesome. And thanks for going step by step through that process. The other thing you forgot to mention that there's none of is toilets, which that's everyone's fear in the real estate game, is having to go plunge a toilet at 1 a.m. That is awesome. How, if
no tenants, no toilets, no trash.
Yeah. Yep. No termites either. Yeah. All the T's
termites
you don't have to worry about, which is good stuff. If you're getting started and you're looking to find a market to buy land, are there specific market parameters or things that you're looking for in your market?
Yeah. I mean, Alex, let's face it. Nobody wakes up and thinks to themselves, boy, I'd like some raw land today in Iowa, unless you live in Iowa. So we want to focus on areas in the Southwest, a little bit in the Northwest, California and Florida. So Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, California, Florida, parts of the Midwest that are treed. These are going to be our biggest buyer pool. And so those are really going to be the areas that I want to focus on.
Is there specific lot size that you're looking for, or kind of open to anything?
Yeah. So if I'm buying any asset 25, 30 cents on the dollar, I'm making my money on the buy. I'm really not particular about lot size. I just want to make sure there's a market. And so the way that I know that there's a market is in my county research. So for example, let's say that you and I go fishing, right? And we're on the lake and we see there's 10 boats on one side of the lake and they're all catching fish. And then we see on the other side of the lake, there's 2 boats and they're not catching any fish. We have to decide, where are we going to go to catch fish? Well, it's counterintuitive to be the 11th boat. Like, oh, there's all this competition over there, but that's where they're catching the fish. So that's where we want to go. And so you go to a website like landmodo.com and see, where are the land investors buying land that we know definitively that there's a market, and what's my budget? Where can I buy 5 to 7 parcels of land? So if I have $50,000 to invest, well, then I know I can invest $10,000 per parcel. But if I only have $5,000 to invest, well, I need to go to a less expensive county where I can buy land for $1,000 or less. So you have to know your budget, you have to know your market, and that's really where you want to start.
That's beautiful. The cool thing about it too is you don't need, a huge down payment, or a large amount of capital to pay for a down payment for real estate. You're able to get into flipping land with $5,000 or $50,000. It's very market specific, but the capital needed, it sounds like, is much less.
Yeah. I mean, I started with $3,000. I've had clients start with $500. Yeah. It's because really the value is, do you have enough money to send out a mailer? Mm-hmm. So if you can send out, if you have $100, you can send out a mailer. So let's say, for example, I send you an offer, you accept it, but I can't buy it. Well, maybe I'll just wholesale it then, and I'll sign the contract and I'll make some quick cash. And I'll start building up my cash reserves that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you brought up mailers, so I did want to hit on that. What does the marketing process look like for you, or what are you doing to find deals, or would you recommend someone getting started to find deals?
Yeah. So again, to find the deal, you want to do county research, and you want to start at a website like landmodo.com and just see, where are the other land investors like me buying? And then to actually logistically send out offers, there's a software that I've created called lgpass.com. You would get a list at a place like, let's say, datatree.com, and you'd buy the list, you'd create this CSV file, you'd upload it into LG Pass, and they would automatically send out the offers to that list. And then it would take you step by step through the process. So the last thing I want anybody to do is build another job for themselves. So between software on the front end, lgpass.com, geekpay.io on the back end, which is a note collection service that is a set and forget it note collection service, combined with inexpensive virtual assistants from around the world, 90% of this business can be automated, and you can go ahead and start building a passive income machine using these tools.
That's awesome. Super cool. Super cool. Do you typically, for the mailers, are you sending out like a contract with the mailer, or what does a mailer look like typically for you?
Yeah, the mailer is an offer with a contract for them to accept and sign and send back.
Do you have any data on how many mailers you need to send out to close a deal?
So we have a 3 to 5% response rate. So for every 100 offers, we'll get 3 to 5 back. Now, if I get less than 3, I know my offer came in too low. And if I get more than 5, I know my offer came in too high and I have to retrade. It's probably better in this market, depending on your time, to be a little high so that you can retrade. But if you're really busy, you might want to go in a little low and just get that low hanging fruit. So it's up to you, but that's really the metric that we're going to look at.
That's awesome. It's a 3 to 5% response rate. That's pretty good. How many mailers typically, if say someone was getting started, they have a budget of $50,000 and they want to, we'll just use Colorado and as an example, because I'm here, they want to get started flipping land or land investing in Colorado. They have $50,000. They've gone to the county. We figured out, hey, El Paso County, Colorado Springs is a great county to do this in. How many mailers would you tell them to send out as they're getting started? Or would that still be kind of, hey, let's do 100, see how we get response and tailor that as we go?
The way I would do it is I would do 30 a day. And why 30 a day? Number one, it's like working out. If I tell you your first week of working out, I want you to work out 2 hours a day, you'd be overwhelmed. But it also allows you to gauge the market quicker and you get a quicker response rate and you're sort of mitigating your pricing risk by doing 30 a day because it's going to be a 6-week lag time. 6 to 8 weeks before we start getting offers back. And so 30 a day gets you into a nice, easy habit of making offers. It's not going to hurt your cash flow either, $30 a day. And that's what I would recommend before you ramp up more.
Yeah, absolutely. And that probably gives you time too to build up that VA team, get your systems working as you continue to scale up from that perspective. That's fantastic. Well, going back kind of to lot size and land characteristics, is there a specific type of land that you're looking for? Are you looking for something that's already got a driveway and easily able to be buildable, or that doesn't really matter as much? Or are you looking for something with utilities already, or just a combination of all the above?
I don't care. I want the asset 25, 30 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
It could be totally vacant. It could have improvements. I don't care.
Okay. Are you typically getting these perked to see what you could build on it, or not worth it?
Nope, not worth it to me.
That's awesome. I love it. So, hey, the big thing is buying it right and then repositioning it correctly. But if you bought it right, the reposition aspect seems to be a lot easier from that perspective.
Exactly.
That's awesome. The folks that are typically buying it, you mentioned the neighbors. Are there another large pool of folks that are typically buying this land? Is it folks who are looking to build a second home, hunting? Is there anything that jumps out at you?
Yeah, I mean, it's people that are typically wanting to do something in some future date with that land. And they thought, oh, I'll never be able to afford a piece of land. Now it's affordable. And maybe I can go out there, I can hunt, or I can camp. I can put a tiny home out there. I can do whatever I really want to do. They want unrestricted land typically. And so that's really the buyer or the legacy investors. Like, okay, here's an asset. I don't have to maintain. I don't have to protect. Can't be destroyed. It lasts forever. And I heard growing up, I should always own land. And so those are other types of investors as well. But typically, because we're buying more rural land an hour or two outside of the city, we're not getting people that are looking to build their dream home right away out on those parcels.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And the other beauty of land is they're not making any more of it. So that definitely helps from that perspective. Very cool. So are you typically doing seller financing on the land, as you mentioned, or are you flipping land, or are you doing a combination of all the above?
I only want seller financing.
Okay.
Because I don't want cash. I want cash flow. I think it's the antidote to financial insecurity.
Yeah.
So once my cash flow exceeds my fixed expenses, then I'm totally free to work when I want, where I want, and with whom I want, move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-actualization to do what I really want to do in life. So cash is great, but then I've got to pay taxes and do it again. And it feels like a job where if I have this machine of cash flow coming in, a river of nickels, it compounds and it can be life-changing.
Yeah, absolutely. That is beautiful. Did you figure out for yourself, hey, there's a specific cash flow number I want to have, and then I've reached that freedom? And if you did do that or did not, what was it like when you finally realized, like, hey, I have that financial freedom. I have that time freedom to work when I want, where I want, with who I want. What was that moment like for you?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. You'd think like I'd be so happy. The half-life of accomplishing a goal is really short. And so then at least for me, you kind of end up moving the goalposts. And I remember at some point, I remember like feeling just kind of empty. And I think the reason I felt that emptiness was it was more egoic. And then it was just this very sad, lonely, empty feeling. Like I reached this goal, now what? And I read this book by David Brooks called The Second Mountain. And the first mountain is more egoic, where we kind of do what your parents tell you to do, what culture tells you to do. You get it, you work hard in school, you get the good education, you get the good job, you get the nice house, you get the car, you go on the vacations, and you get to the top of the mountain if you're lucky, and you experience what I experienced. It's just this emptiness. And so you go on to the second mountain, and the second mountain is other focused. It's about vocation. It's about community. It's about your faith and spirituality. It's about love and intimacy. And so in your relationships. And so that second mountain is a harder mountain to climb, but it's way more fulfilling. And so I think that's the journey that I'm on now, is helping other people, because yeah, I mean, flipping land and selling that was great. It was great for me. It's great for my family, but there's nothing better for me when somebody tells me, hey, Mark, you changed my life by teaching me this land investing strategy. And I really feel like professionally, I could die at peace now because it's been enough people, but I want to free more people if I can.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love thinking about it that way, the second mountain. I think about, here in Colorado, of course, we have the 14ers, and, everyone wants to climb the 14ers, the 14,000 foot peaks. And I feel like that's the same as in life. We get so wrapped up in getting to the summit and having that mountaintop moment. When we get to the top, we're like, well, this is beautiful, but like, what's next? What's that next mountain I'm going to climb? Instead of really taking time to turn around and look at how far you've climbed up that mountain and look at the view along the way. And that's really important to do that. So yeah, I love that. That is awesome. And what a cool way for you to just really change family trees and get people out of their jobs that they're burnt out on, and, be able to provide such a cool opportunity for them. So that's such a cool thing that you're doing with the Land Geek, and such a cool thing that real estate offers, the ability to get that freedom back.
No, yeah, I mean, we're here for such an insultingly short period of time. You might as well enjoy it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it goes by fast, that's for sure. Yeah, well, that is awesome. Well, you mentioned that you typically have a team of VAs, and about 90% of this is automated. So I'm sure there's a lot of physicians whose ears perked up when you said 90% is automated, because time is not something that we have a lot of. What are some things that you've learned or that you look for when you're trying to find a VA to help you out with this process?
Yeah. So there are companies out there right now that have trained virtual assistants in the land business. So there's landvaforyou.com, there's landmasters.us, there's parcelreview.com that'll do your due diligence. And even my company will, so I, basically like going back, like I want to help everyone along the economic spectrum. So if you have tons of time and no money, I'll give you free information. We've got tons of it. If you've got a good W-2 job and you want to get out of it and you've got time for a side hustle, then we have a done with you program. And if you're an accredited investor, we have a done for you program, and you just give us money and we'll do it for you.
That's awesome. Yeah. What a cool way to kind of hit that whole, continuum of folks from that perspective. What do you see most commonly folks are wanting you to do or help out with in your business? Is it more accredited folks, or is it more the folks that are, bootstrapping it and working hard? They have the hustle, they have the knowledge, maybe they don't have the money to get started in land investing.
Yeah, I mean, the people that I see more are going to be done with you people. They've got a really good job and they've got some time and they want to create this business for themselves and their family. Accredited investors, you're talking about the top 1% in the US. So they do come to me, but that's a very small pool of people.
Yeah. And again, it's so cool, the accessibility of land, as we mentioned, and it's awesome that whole spectrum, really anyone, can do this, which is really awesome. You've built a really impressive business in terms of educational platform, podcasts, all these other businesses within businesses, a lot of vertical integration. How did you do that as you were going through your journey of land investing? How did you come to that realization of like, hey, I'm really onto something here. I can kind of build all of this out. How was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I just scratched my own itch. So I needed it for my own business. And then I thought, okay, if I'm building this for myself, I can help other people as well. And just did that.
That's awesome.
It was nothing more simple, really.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's what we're doing in the residential assisted living space with the Row Room Assisted Living Mastermind. We're like, hey, this is something that's super needed in the space, and we have the opportunity to create this community, create this mastermind, bring the experts in. We're learning just as much as our members are, and we may just be a couple steps ahead of a lot of them, but we're all learning together, growing together, and changing that industry. And I feel like it's similar for land. I think, from a real estate investing perspective, I think probably the 4 best plays in real estate right now is residential assisted living. I'm biased, I have to say that first, but land investing, boutique hotels, and mobile home parks, I feel like are the top 4 of like, hey, those are the areas that I would feel very comfortable recommending to people to invest in now and in the future as well.
Yeah. I don't know much about the boutique hotels and residential assisted living, but mobile home parks and self-storage have the lowest default rates in the real estate niche. So those are great. And then, of course, with the demographics of aging, we're all going to end up in assisted living. So you might as well end up owning it, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, there's an enormous shortage already. We're about 1 million beds short for assisted living, and that's only going to continue to grow as the baby boomers age. But anyways, let's get back to land, which is amazing. Do you mind sharing with the listeners a deal or two that was just a home run for you? Is there a deal that comes to mind, or a kind of a deal deep dive that we could do?
Yeah, I mean, this is years ago when I first started. Again, I have this investment banking background. So I found a company that did a huge deal with the railroad. So Morgan Stanley, they had a group, they did a huge deal with the railroad. And then a public company came in and bought up all the land from Morgan Stanley for the mineral rights. And they had a bunch of land in their portfolio that they didn't want, they just wanted the mineral rights. So I came in and I said, okay, I'll buy up all this land, 640 acre parcels, they're sections of land, 1 square mile for $50 an acre. And they said, okay, great. And I flipped them for $500 an acre. And so on that one deal, I made over $5 million.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, that's a home run.
That was a home run deal.
Yeah. That's awesome. What does a typical single or a double look like for your land investors or folks that you've worked with or yourself?
Yeah, I mean, our average yield is 72%, which means we're going to double our money every year. Our average ROI on a cash flip is 300%, and on a terms deal is 800 to 1,200%. Whew.
Can't get that anywhere else.
No, you can't. I mean, it's an inefficient model. So that's the terrible thing. And the great thing about land is no one really knows the value. So it's not like you can go on Zillow and see all these comps. I mean, the comparables are all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. How the due diligence process, how much of due diligence are you typically doing when you get one of these contracts back from your direct mail? How much due diligence are you doing? And it sounds like really the VAs are doing the majority of it for you at this point, but what does that process look like from a due diligence perspective?
So it's just like anything that somebody would want to know for their property. So I want aerial maps, I want the plat map, I want the satellite map. I want to know what restrictions are. I want to know from planning and zoning. I want to know about the soil. I want to know the well depth. I want to know what the roads are like. I want to know what the neighbors are doing. I want to know how far we are from the nearest services. I want to know the GPS coordinate. So really, I want to get a full picture of that land. And then, of course, I want to make sure that I'm not buying in an area that could be a super fun site. So we'll double check it like EPA.gov. Now, we're not buying in areas that are industrial or manufacturing areas like in Ohio or Pennsylvania, New Jersey. But even still, just to double check, I want to know what's going on from an environmental impact standpoint as well. And I just want to know the story about the land and what you can do on it, what you can't do on it, and then tell that story to someone else, get them excited about making that investment.
That's fantastic. In terms of the seller finance, you mentioned that geekpay.io is a note service that you have, or note servicing company that you have wrapped up in the Land Geek enterprise, I guess, which is awesome. What does that look like typically? Are folks typically paying every month? Do you have much default, or are folks who aren't paying back on the notes?
Yeah, so we use a purchase sale agreement, a promissory note, and a land sale contract. So a land sale contract says, while you're making payments, if you go into default, you get 30 days to cure your default. If you don't cure your default, then we keep your down payment, we keep your monthly payments, we resell that property. And so what happens is about 10 to 12% of the time, because we don't do credit checks, is that somebody defaults, they've lowered our cost basis, we resell that property, and we increase our ROI.
Man, that's awesome. And do you always do your down payment typically the purchase price of the land, or does it just depend based off parcel size and the purchase price?
It just depends on the parcel size, purchase price, economy.
Okay.
So ideally, I'll get my money out on the down payment, but I could go 6 to 10 months out and the numbers still work.
Awesome. Have you seen what are some common pitfalls or things that you've seen, deals that have gone bad? What are some of those that you've seen, or what are things to look out for from that perspective?
Well, you certainly don't want to overpay. You want to know what you're doing. I'd say our biggest newbie mistake is fear. So what happens is they buy a piece of property and then they stop deal flow. And again, remember, it's 6 to 8 weeks before you get your next deal. So then they're like, okay, one in, one out. And then they sell the property. I mean, I've done this over 6,500 times. I've never been stuck with a piece of raw land. They all sell, and there's a pig for every barn. So even something that you think would never sell, I mean, it's crazy. They all sell at the right price. So that's sort of the biggest newbie mistake is fear and stopping deal flow. Now you're a chicken company with no chicken.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Andrew, my brother, if you're listening to this, does that sound familiar? Because my he's flipping land, and they did the same thing. They sent out a bunch of mailers. They got a few contracts back. They bought a few, flipped a few, and then they're like, oh man, we're not getting any deals. And they hadn't sent out new mailers and hadn't continued to send those mailers out. So I was really hoping that you said that. So if he's listening, he'll feel that realization there for sure. Mark, that is awesome. Are there any other tips, tricks, anything you'd recommend to folks just getting started? And then of course, please, we want to talk about your book, Dirt Rich, and how you wrote that and those sorts of things as well.
I mean, I think when you're first getting started, you need to have a beginner's mind. I think when you're a physician and you're used to having mastery and now you're going to go into something, you got to embrace the suck. And there's this great Zig Ziglar quote, if you'll do for the next 3 to 5 years what other people won't do, you'll be able to do for the rest of your life what other people can't do. And so to have that grit, to have that resilience, to embrace the suck in doing something new, I think is really important for mastery, and not just in the land business, but any business really. So that would be my biggest tip or trick.
That's great advice. Yeah. We've, as physicians, embraced a lot of suck, but I will say a lot of us are really analytical, and we want to have all the facts, and we want to really understand everything before we're willing to take that leap. And sometimes, we just have to be willing to take imperfect action and just get started and trust like, hey, Mark's done 6,500 of these deals and it's worked out. It's probably going to work out for me too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk about the book, Dirt Rich and Land Geek. How can folks get the book if they're interested in reading that? And how can they work with you or learn more about the Land Geek and everything that you guys offer?
Yeah. So I would say for the book, I've got a link for your listeners to get the book for free, just pay shipping. And that's a great place to hear my story and go a little bit deeper into the model that we discussed. Dirt Rich 2 just came out, which would be more advanced. It's the plot thickens, how to scale your land business without skipping a beat. And then just to go to thelandgeek.com and start there and see if this model resonates with you.
That's awesome. Well, I will definitely be getting the book here soon, and I'm really excited to read that Dirt Rich and then Dirt Rich 2 after that. Is Dirt Rich 2, are you able to get that on your website, or is it on Amazon, or what's the best place to get
We haven't launched it yet. It's
okay.
Just went on Amazon. So if you want to wait, get Dirt Rich first and then wait for our launch.
Sounds good. Well, that is awesome, Mark. Well, we'll be sure to include all the links to those in the show notes. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Thanks for sharing your book. Totally free. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dr. Alex. I appreciate you, brother.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, with that, it has been Dr. Alex Schloe and Mark Podolsky. I just butchered your last name. I apologize. We talked about this before the podcast. Dr. Alex Schloe and Mark Podolsky with the Physicians and Properties podcast, signing off. Hey, real quick, if you're still listening to this, I'm assuming you got value from it. So I need your help specifically. My 2-year vision with this podcast is to help 100,000 physicians learn how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want. There are 2 main ways that a podcast grows. One is through ratings and reviews, and the other is word of mouth. If you can please leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as send this to 1 to 2 friends that you think would get value from it, we can reach the physicians that we want to reach. Thanks in advance, and talk to you on the next episode. Please note that the information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial or medical advice. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the host and the guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.